The Russian language internet is truly great and terrible. Every day, this segment of the World Wide Web receives so many wild stories that there would be enough plots for dozens of seasons if some director decided to make a series about life in this country. And have you heard anything about the light that has been flickering for many years in the house across the street? Or about the neural network that turns an ordinary sentence into otherworldly texts? About a clan of cannibals living on the floor below, or an anesthesiologist who killed dozens of people and bragged about his exploits on an anonymous site? If not, then it would not be a sin to listen to such things. Welcome to the dark side of the Russian RuNet. Hello everyone, this is Exie, let's go! Back in 2011, on the 2-channel website, one of the users caused a real stir. He told other Anons a very creepy story. The thing is that for 3 years now, he has been observing strange flickering of the light in the house across the street. And the peculiarity is that the light starts flickering at a strictly defined time, from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., while the flickering frequency can change. The post was in many ways like a cry for help. It was clear that the man was, if not scared, then pretty tired of the nightly flickering of the light. A little later, at the request of other users, he shot a video where it is indeed clear that the light in 2 windows is flickering in a very unusual way. First it slowly flares up, and then suddenly goes out. Then everything starts all over again. Very soon the paranoia was transmitted from the author of the post to the other forum participants, and they began to offer their own versions of what was happening in the mysterious evil apartment. The most varied versions were used, from aliens and satanic rituals to quite rational explanations, to which we will return later. After some time, the author plucked up courage and decided to visit the apartment. However, he did not succeed right away, since the guards stood up for the secrets of the house. Then the guy used Plan B and brought in a Trojan horse, or rather realtors. Having found out that there was an apartment for rent in the house, he made up a story about his uncle coming to town soon and he would like to stay in some nice apartment. According to the stories, the apartments there were really luxurious and even 2-story. The author of the post entered the house under the pretext of inspecting the apartment, listened meticulously to the tour of the living space, and then, having seen the realtor off, began to inspect the house. According to his calculations, the apartment should have been located on the 11th floor, where he noticed a camera, the only one in the entire building in one apartment. A woman opened the door for him, who, to all questions about the flashing light, answered that everything was fine with them. The conversation with his second tenant took place through a massive metal door, possibly equipped with a video doorbell. After a little hesitation, the male voice admitted that the light was indeed flashing in his apartment, and faulty wiring was to blame. The guy tried to find out something. The guard, however, refused to answer questions, stating that she does not give out information about tenants. After the visit, the windows for the first time in several years did not flash. However, the next evening everything resumed, but at a different time. As far as is known, no one made any further proven attempts to sort out the situation. The author of the post soon stopped communicating altogether. And yet, what is the secret of the flickering windows? As already noted, various ideas were expressed on the forum, some quite sensible. Someone said that it was all about the blinking light bulb and lazy residents who were so accustomed to the flickering light that they did not pay attention to it. But the most likely version is the following. Many noticed that a camera had gone down on the floor. Moreover, the owner did not even go out into the corridor, but conducted a conversation through a rather massive door. This suggests that the owner himself is quite paranoid, as is possibly the author of the post. A person who is really afraid of apartment burglaries would equip an apartment with such things in the 11th year, and manipulations with light are a very common technique to simulate vigorous activity in the apartment when the owner is absent. By the way, something similar, only in a more sophisticated way, was pulled off by Kevin in the movie Home Alone. Well, and finally, here is another rational explanation of a similar case. This time in Ukrainian Kherson, the residents of the courtyard were also haunted by the eternally flickering light in the windows. After people made a fuss, the terrible truth came out. It turned out that the apartment housed Uker telecom radio equipment. The fact is that the work of the signal amplifiers was accompanied by the flickering of an ordinary incandescent lamp, so that the operator could monitor the smooth operation of the system. As a result, the lamps were replaced with weaker ones, and they promised to cover the windows with curtains. So if the windows in the house next to you flicker, perhaps there is no mysticism there. Or maybe there is. The Porfiryevich neural network. A very funny thing at first. You only need to enter the first sentence, and the neural network will compose the rest of the text on its own. It turns out to be a very coherent, and logically constructed narrative. But sometimes it happens that the neural network produces very strange texts, which are not related to the original sentence at all. These are the stories that a neural network can develop from lines in books by Russian writers. One day in the cold winter, Ivan was sitting under a thick birch tree and chopping birch twigs for shoemaking. Suddenly, he heard a quiet voice from behind the trees. "Hello, Ivan. We haven't seen each other for a long time." Ivan turned around and saw an old man standing in front of him. All the old man's teeth were knocked out, and his clothes were torn and spattered with blood. Ivan got scared. "Where are you from, Grandpa? Where are you going, and who are you?" The old man smiled, and suddenly such a stream of blood gushed from his mouth that Ivan got scared and hurried away. Or here's another option. The grandfather planted a turnip, and the turnip's eyes had already opened. And the old man looks at the turnip, and it looks up. And the old man sees a swarm in the sky, and nearby the turnip is trampling the devil. And below under the child is the devil. The old man rose to his feet and shouts, "Hey turnip, who are you?" And the turnip answered, "I am the devil, I am the devil." Sasha walked along the highway and suddenly felt some kind of melancholy and fear. Returned, went again from the other side, and again for the same reason, and again she wanted to go back. It seemed to her that she was the last of this world. I go out alone on the road and see a big black stone. I sat down under it to take a nap. Suddenly, a black man comes out from behind the stone. Creepy, isn't it? 2-channel users suggested a variety of explanations for this phenomenon. The neural network was allocated by their own consciousness, acquired all sorts of otherworldly powers, and so on. One user noted that the neural network itself has a name reminiscent of the name of a police literary robot named Porfiry Petrovich from a novel by Viktor Pelevin. He turned out to be the closest to solving the mystery. The neural network, created by the Russian programmer Mikhail Grinkin, is based on texts by Russian writers, including Bulgakov, Gogol, and Pelevin. Those who are familiar with Russian literature will perfectly understand what texts will be generated by a neural network created based on the works of these authors. Bulgakov and Gogol are the most famous lovers of devilry among the pantheon of Russian writers. And Viktor Pelevin was never shy about expressions or the most insane plot lines. So everything is explained quite simply, but again, it's up to you to decide. Maybe it's all a scam, and the neural network actually has its own dark consciousness. Shentropure codes. The mysterious Shentropure codes are famous for the fact that few people know anything about them except their name. But these codes have excited a lot of forum users. We are talking about a certain digital sequence that looks like this. You can generate such a code using a special utility, as well as on the website. For what? In the most complete text about these mysterious codes, we find a categorical answer. Stupidly for fun. However, it goes on to clarify that these codes are used by micro-designers to obtain specific transactions. Understand it as you want. In general, it's a dark matter, probably only available to necro-designers. Whoever they were, a thorough Google search leads to a very specific site, no writer Yuri Shimanovsky, where the complex history of the appearance of the Shentropure codes. It turns out that in 1812, in Vyazma district, a wounded Frenchman named Jean-Baptiste Shentropure was found. Fortunately, he was found by another Frenchman who had fled from the revolution and settled in Russia. He persuaded the local landlord Mekov to shelter and assist his former compatriot. As it turned out, a deserter. Shentropure lost a foot, but managed to survive. As a reward for saving him, he shared the secret of the parchment found in a Greek monastery. There were many mathematical formulas and strange numerical sequences. However, after some time, the Frenchman fell into paranoia. All the time, he talked about unknown pursuers, and then he hanged himself. The parchment eventually fell into the hands of specialists who released the Shentrapur's cutie to the people. That's the story. It must be said that Szymanowski is a very colorful personality. On his website, you can find a description of a time machine, practical advice on levitation, as well as proof that Putin is a god. With a high degree of probability, we can say that the Shentrapur codes are also one of the ingenious inventions of Pan Szymanowski, as the writer calls himself. An invention that some users picked up and developed into a kind of alternative reality game. Are all these codes, which forum users love to throw to each other, something that makes sense? Or is it just a stupid set of symbols? It is not clear. Anesthesiologist, a killer doctor. Some time ago on 2channel, an anonymous user, introducing himself as a nurse from one of the hospitals, described in detail how he sent more than 10 seriously ill patients to the next world by turning off the life support system. He said that he really liked watching the last minutes of people's lives, and the high mortality rate in the hospital allowed them to remain unpunished for a long time. While the Anon savored the details of his crimes, users of this site began their own investigation. The efforts very soon bore fruit. The armchair experts and detectives literally only needed one photo of clothes from the workplace, which the doctor published. Users assumed that the anonymous person was an anesthesiologist of the Kirov Hospital for War Veterans. After the armchair detectives, the prosecutor's office took him over. The nurse was tested on a lie detector, and at the same time they raised autopsy documents for the last few years. However, it turned out that all the deceased patients died of natural causes. Moreover, the hospital doctor explained that modern ventilators are monitored remotely, and any changes in their work are recorded in the internal memory, so the killer could be identified after the first such case. As a result, all charges against the nurse were dropped. Moreover, the young man came to the city from the village and was not even friends with social networks, not to mention anonymous forums. The story soon took an unexpected turn. It turned out that the anonymous posts were left by another anesthesiologist, this time from Perm. That is, at the first attempt, the users came across the wrong one. So, the Perm anesthesiologist wrote all this, getting completely drunk in the evenings. The investigation found out that in fact, he had not killed anyone. The hospital management considered the actions of the doctor a gross violation of professional ethics and terminated his employment contract. It turned out that the first man was attacked in vain. The accusations were unfair. He managed to become a victim of bullying, even recorded a video message. But in the end of the second one, he turned out to be the one. It is interesting that there are a lot of armchair detectives on anonymous forums who really often, very accurately search the network for data on certain criminals. Russian reality. This story is known to many who were interested in the Russian internet in 2015. Because the author of the story himself shot a lot of videos, and a lot of bloggers invited him to them, and of course the topic was discussed on many Russian language sites. Physics teacher Ivan Namovmov moved into his parents' apartment. When the joy of the housewarming died down, the first squabbles with the neighbors began, and it turned out that the old lady downstairs was watching TV very loudly. When it was not possible to settle the problem peacefully, Ivan moved to decisive action, namely, began to listen to loud music. This was the beginning of the war, where instead of shells, endless statements to the prosecutor's office and clarification of relations with the old woman's relatives came into play, including pepper sprays. One fine day, Ivan even heard a strange conversation in the neighbor's kitchen. Lowering a dictaphone through the ventilation and deciphering the recordings, Ivan was horrified. It turned out that the family below were hereditary murderers and cannibals. In their conversations, they actively discussed the people they had killed, the taste qualities of one or another human organ, and also thought about plans to kidnap and murder Ivan and his family. Without thinking twice, Ivan wrote a statement to the investigative authorities, but was refused with a wording about insufficient evidence. All this made him believe that the police were not only careless about their duties, but were also openly protecting the cannibals, allowing them to deal with their victims with impunity. The conversations in the kitchen downstairs continued, as a result of which Ivan decided to immigrate to Finland. He presented all the evidence he had collected in the film Russian Reality, after which he became a regular guest on the air of the most famous Russian-speaking bloggers. This is the harsh Russian reality. Corrupt cops, cannibal neighbors' points, and the 80-year-old godmother of the city mafia. The peculiarity of Ivan's film is that he actively shares the results of his investigation with the public, dubbing numerous audio recordings with subtitles. But that is the weakness of the whole story, because if you listen critically to the words, without paying attention to the subtitles, you can understand that some of the conversations that he recorded there in the kitchen hood through his dictaphone are completely incomprehensible. Some are innocent, everyday conversations about the housing issue, moving to the Crimea, and about ways to cook fish and squid. And some, well, maybe somehow are intertwined with his whole story. There is one feature of our brain. A person listening to an incomprehensible recording with subtitles really begins to hear what is written at the bottom of the screen. That is, under other circumstances, a person would have perceived everything as scraps of phrases, the background noise of the TV, the clink of dishes, and not the click of a pistol. The story itself died out somewhere in the middle. No one tried to catch any cannibals. Here, several explanations suggest themselves. Either Ivan is a very good actor and a troll, but I don't like this version. Either he suffered from a serious case of paranoia, got seriously carried away, and in reality the neighbors did not pose any danger, or cannibals really did live next to him. Of course, all the stories that I told you today are just the tip of the iceberg. The Russian internet is full of mysterious stories and secrets. Be careful. Thanks for watching. It was Exie with you. Subscribe to the channel, leave your comments and likes. Good luck to everyone, and bye.